Hello, hello, friends. Welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast. My name is Mark Lesney. I'm one of your hosts, along with my business partner and registered dietitian extraordinaire, Danielle Glesney. Danielle, how are you? How are things? As I usually ask you at the top of every episode, how are things up in St. Louis?
Pretty good. Pretty good. We're off of school one more day, long weekend, so.
That's true. We're recording this on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so a little... Our Mondays are usually our podcast record day, and so we're at home with the kids. I had to go tell the kids to be quiet because Auntie Danielle and I are recording a podcast, and so we're doing well down here in Nashville as well. And we were starting to talk just before hitting record. We're excited. It's 2023. We're doing a bit of a all family trip this summer to Colorado, so we were talking about us driving up to St. Louis from Nashville, crashing at y'all's house for a night, and then us getting in the car with all the kiddos, all 5 combined kiddos in 2 different cars, and migrating, which would be with no stops, a 13-hour trip to where we're going to stay in Colorado, but with kids that'll probably end up being about 74 hours or something like that together. So with the bathroom breaks and all the things. So,
oh gosh.
Anyways, that'll be fun. Looking forward to it. But speaking of 2023, we're doing something a little bit different this month with the podcast. And so we look forward to and are continuing to think about questions that you have or receiving questions from you guys for these podcast episodes. So if you have a nutrition question that we can help with, we would love to do that. Just head over to our website, Imago Nutrition, IMAGO nutrition.com/podcast. You can submit your question. Because what we typically do, or what we typically have done, is we base our episodes around questions that come from you. It's just one way that we can be helpful. It's something that we love to do. But as I said, we're doing something just a little different in January. So if you've been following along, you'll notice that we're taking the 5 weeks in January to talk about some popular diets. And so that's what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. We've got 2 more to go this episode and then 1 more. And so we've covered a couple various topics. Now, obviously, there's lots of diets, and we can't cover them all. So we've selected a few. And in the first week, we looked at keto, very low-carb diet. We take a look at what that is, how it works, pros and cons, what if we recommend it. Second week, we looked at veganism and vegetarianism, which, of course, those limit or eliminate entirely animal products. And so we took a look at that, pros and cons, considerations with those. Last week, we took a look at paleo, or the Paleolithic diet. Okay, so that's one that proposes to eat just foods that were available to humans in the Paleolithic era. And it's funny, I was watching a video actually this morning about strength training and nutrition and CrossFit. I don't do CrossFit. I've done a few CrossFit workouts, but they talked about that. They just talked about how that is very they use a principle known as relatedness, is that when it comes to nutrition in the CrossFit world, they do paleo, and it becomes very relatable because it's more than just a diet. It's really just part of their lifestyle and their culture. And so we took a look at pros and cons, things to consider when looking at the paleo diet. And so if you've got questions about that, be sure to go to the last episode. And then today we've got something a little bit different, even within this series, which is a little bit different. And so I'll try to maybe just give us a quick little context, but Danielle's you're really going to lead us through this. This is something that you've spent a lot of your time as an RD working with folks on, and this is a very specific protocol, if you will, with very specific purpose and very specific requirements. And so today we're going to be talking about the DASH diet. And DASH is an acronym that stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And so this one's a little different because it's not sort of like this fad weight loss, hey, all my friends at Zumba are doing, DASH to drop some pounds. This one's a little different, right? So with that, Danielle, why don't you kind of get us started? And I'm going to really sit back and learn. I'm somewhat familiar with DASH, have certainly worked through its protocol and understand it, but you've really been helping people practice this for well over a decade, I'm assuming. And so would love to learn from you in this process too. Might pop in with some questions or some, random thoughts from me. And so, why don't you take us through the DASH diet?
All right. Thanks, Mark. So the DASH diet, like you said, is, dietary approaches to stop hypertension. So it is really specifically designed to lower blood pressure It was, created 20 years ago. I think that's what I wrote down. Yes, 20 years ago. And it's still recommended today. So that's a huge pro that it's been, around a long time, and the effectiveness has, held true. So just a little background on blood pressure or hypertension is, it's the pressure in your blood vessels that can, over time, if it's too high, can really damage those blood vessels and increase risk of heart disease and stroke. So it's kind of not just for lowering blood pressure, something our doctor tells us we need to do. It's really, they're trying to decrease your risk for heart disease and stroke.
And real quick, because anytime I hear the term heart disease, one of the things that is as tough as it is to point out, I always want to be sure to point out, as I say, heart disease doesn't get a lot of media time. It doesn't get a lot of cover time, if you will. But what a lot of people don't realize is that heart disease is the number one cause of premature death. I mean, obviously, getting older and just dying is the number one cause of death, right? But we're talking about premature death. It's the number one cause of premature death in the United States and in the entire world. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with this, but you rarely hear about a heart disease awareness month, or you run your local heart disease marathon or something like that, or your half marathon or something like that. And I'm not against those things. I've run in those things. I love those, but we need to be mindful that the number one cause of premature death is heart disease. So when we talk about this is very, very important. It's something that a lot of people are on a trajectory toward, unfortunately, or ultimately deal with. So all that's to say, I don't want to bring like a heavy thought at the top, but every time I hear heart disease, I just want us to be mindful that this is a much larger, it's the largest issue when it comes to premature death. So with that, back to you, Danielle.
So actually, it's good timing, Mark, because February is American Heart Month. So we always had heart fair at the hospital in February. So you just brought that to my mind. So so I agree with you. I think one thing also people don't know is high blood pressure is what they call a silent killer, which means you don't typically have a lot of symptoms or awareness that you have high blood pressure. So you do obviously need to be going to your doctor regularly to find out if that is affecting you. So one other stat, nearly half of the U.S. population has high blood pressure, and most is considered uncontrolled. So that's a little bit scary. I guess I just said one more fact, but here's one more. I'll just keep going.
But wait, there's more.
So it's really interesting that you said around the world. I'm not, I haven't done that research, but the CDC states that countries where the diets are low in salt, those people don't experience an increase in blood pressure as they age. So our country does experience an increase in blood pressure with age. And I feel like that causes people to think, oh, it just happens because I'm getting older. But in other countries, that doesn't happen. So I think what's really positive about blood pressure is it's not easy, but once, one specific thing, which we'll talk about, lowering your sodium, is achieved, your blood pressure can improve within weeks. So that's really fast of a positive outcome. If you think about, your goals with other diets, what they may be. So
yeah, because a lot of times we're talking about long-term patience, right? Like things that people don't want to hear. Oh, it's going to take longer than you want. It's going to take more patience than you want. It's going to take more focus than you want, more effort than you want. It's going to take more consistency than you want. And, we talk about that, especially with like our weight loss clients. Like you've got to be in a long-term mindset and a slow burn, half a pound, 1 pound a week over week, month after. But this one has very powerful effect. Again, really an acute effect with your health, and it happens pretty quick, which is really cool. And that could hopefully be pretty motivating for some folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's definitely not easy. We can talk about, some of the ways to lower your sodium, but I would specifically want you to turn to, we do have a self-study that goes through all of this in really great detail. So that's available on our website. If you just go under the blood pressure page, Mark, right?
Yes. Yeah. So if you go to our website, you click in the navigation, you will see a services tab. And so when you click into that services tab, click on high blood pressure. And so we have there exactly what Danielle's describing. We have a self-study, very inexpensive. It's a way for you to download that and then work through that material on your own. And of course, reach out if we can answer any questions and be of any guidance. But we really want to equip you to be able to take control of your health in this regard on your own, even if you're not ready to meet with someone. That's okay. That's exactly what the self-study is designed to do. And so, yes, go to the website, go to the navigation, click on services, and then click on high blood pressure. And you'll see what we call our self-study there, authored by, again, Danielle, registered dietitian, has been working on this for many, many years. It's an incredible document. So be sure to check that out.
Thanks, Mark. So let's get just like what it is. Okay. So this DASH diet is a high fruits and veggies, whole grains, low-fat dairy, fish, poultry, and then also plant-based proteins. So we are definitely including all food groups. The ones that I didn't mention is red meats, sweets, and added sugars. Okay, so those types of foods are going to be reduced, but not eliminated. So this is not what I call an elimination diet. This is working for balance. So I think that's definitely one of the pros to this is after practice, it can be really maintainable. And it can be implemented for the whole family. So it's not like you need to follow something because you have high blood pressure. And that kind of goes into what I would say is my take on this. Yes, it is designed for lowering high blood pressure, which also decreases risk for heart disease. But the title, I would say the title of it is a con because it kind of is, not being made aware to everyone else. It really couldn't be just used for overall good general health and nutrition. So, so I think that's the con is that the title doesn't make it very aware. Most people are not aware of it, but it's been on the National Weight Registry of the most effective diet for many years now. So.
And I'd also like to point out, too, that it's of course, in keeping. So if you've been listening to our podcast, you've likely heard us mention what we call the 4 pillars of nutrition. This is something that we teach. And this is really in line with that. Now, when we teach the 4 pillars, we're talking about 4, again, pillars of food that include lean meat, seafood, and dairy. So the caveat there is remember that we want to reduce, we want to be very fairly minimal, I should say, in the red meat category. We're talking about lean meat, lean seafood, those low and non-fat dairies, fruits and vegetables is the second pillar, whole grains is the third, nuts and seeds is the fourth. So this is one of those things that when you take a look at it, you're like, oh, this is just good nutrition. That's the point. And so the point about like, it is unfortunate that it has this name, right? It's like the DASH diet, people are like, oh, it's another diet, but this is really just proper nutrition, to be honest. And so even those of us that are proponents of red meat, I wouldn't be a proponent of eating it every day. You don't need to. You want to get a wide variety of these sources. So all that's to say, it looks very similar. And we talked about this a bit last week with paleo, is we just talked about preferring more of these nutrient dense foods, these pillars in your nutrition. And lo and behold, guess what? Better health outcomes come from that. One of which is lower blood pressure.
Right. Okay. So in the, design and study of this diet, obviously they found that just lowering your sodium intake, no matter what eating style you're doing, does lower blood pressure. Okay. So if you, like I said, that turned off by that word diet and you just want to start with one thing, and you do have high blood pressure, that would be to lower your sodium. Because no matter what you're doing, if you're lowering your sodium, you are going to lower your blood pressure. Yep. However, when they took that factor out, so the sodium component was the same for all, and they looked at different types of eating styles. The components of the DASH diet was more successful in lowering blood pressure than the others. So you get like a double effect. When you lower the sodium, and then you also incorporate the components of the DASH diet, you're going to get, double benefit, if you will,
Nice.
to lowering your blood pressure. And so let's move on to kind of the pros and cons. I know I've mentioned a few of them because it's kind of hard to talk and not mention a few of them.
Yeah.
So the specifics I should maybe start with is if you're one that really likes to track, you really like numbers, maybe you've done like macros before. In that self-study, like I said, I do include all the stats for the DASH diet. So I'm just going to briefly review those for you. You don't need to write these down per se, because like I said, it's in that self-study. So the components, we have the macros and the micros. So the macros, 55% of your calories coming from carbs, 27% total fat, 27% of calories from total fat. And then 18% of calories from protein. Okay, so those are the macronutrients. They do have a percentage on the saturated fat. So 6% of calories from saturated fat. And just a reminder, saturated fat is the fat from the animal. So what this is leading you to do is choosing plant-based sources of fat over animal-based sources of fat. So that would mean, obviously, we've mentioned low-fat dairy products, and choosing like, plain Greek yogurt for sour cream, or olive oil and canola oil instead of coconut oil. Coconut oil is actually very high in saturated fat. And then, so when we go into the micronutrients, it lays out some, what I guess maybe, I don't know, potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, cholesterol, and fiber. So, fiber is not technically a micronutrient, but if you are going to do this, really hardcore, you would kind of need a tracking tool, if you will, like MyFitnessPal or something that tracks these micronutrients, because it'd be really hard to do this on your own. So that might be a con, but at the same time, if you're including these macronutrients, okay, at those specific levels and not supplementing, you're probably going to be getting close to, the fruits and vegetables you need to get the potassium, magnesium, calcium, if that makes sense. Okay. So the potassium is 4,700 milligrams, calcium, 1,250 milligrams, magnesium, 500 milligrams, cholesterol, 150 milligrams, and 30 grams of fiber per day. Okay. So we've talked about fiber in the past. It's kind of based on per calorie level, per 1,000 calories, how many grams of fiber you need individually. But yeah, this is a 30 grams of fiber per day, and all those other milligrams were per day. So our, the one I didn't mention yet is the sodium. So, did I already mention how much the Americans typically have of sodium? I don't think I did. Mark is frozen. I hope we are still rolling here. So anyway, sodium, the average American intake of sodium is 3,400 milligrams per day. So the average sodium is 3,400 milligrams per day. And the DASH diet is really recommending 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. Okay, so I definitely lost Mark, and hopefully he'll be rejoining us. So moving on, those are the specifics of the DASH diet. Whether you follow those specifics to a T, whether you follow 50% of those specifics, or just some of them, whatever percentage of those specifics you're following is going to lead you in the right direction. Okay. So let's go through these pros and cons. So pro, like I mentioned, you're going to be decreasing risk of heart disease and stroke, but also GI health and weight management. Okay. So those two can be tacked on there because of that 30 grams of fiber per day. as well as you're obviously getting lots of vitamins and minerals from your fruits and veggies. And that fiber we've talked about is really good for GI tract, but also for weight management because it helps you feel full with the least amount of calories. So that's the first pro. I already mentioned it can be implemented for the whole family. I guess the flip side of that is, a low fat diet may be hard for some people to follow. 27% is considered a low fat diet. Once again, it's not low in like animal. We're still having plant fats is what I'm trying to say. But low fat is not necessarily recommended for all life stages. For example, babies to age 2, you're actually recommended to have a high fat diet. So obviously if you're following this and you have a baby, you just give them more avocados, give them more peanut butter, whatever plant-based fats you have around. So you wouldn't be tracking their fat intake anyway. And then the maintainability of this diet after practice. Like I said, the first 2 to 3 weeks, if you're tracking this, would be time consuming and take some practice, as any tracking in any type of diet would be when you get started. But after time, hopefully that would become easier.
And on that point too, Danielle, what we see is that as you use tracking, when I explain tracking to folks, whether it's for weight loss or anything else, think of tracking as an educational environment, right? So you go into a classroom to learn some things, not to stay there for the rest of your life, but to go out into the real world and quote unquote make money, right? Mm-hmm. And so you go into a classroom to learn, to develop some habits and some insights, to put theories to test, et cetera, to garner that knowledge, but then to leave the classroom and to live a sustainable life. And so think about tracking the same way. Think about it in the short term, in terms of an educational environment. It's not a punishment, right? This is something that you're learning to hone in is some of your health practices. And then while you're there, you're in that tracking environment. So whether you do that for 2, 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, a lot of my weight loss clients commit to tracking for at least 12 weeks. But what I say is don't just track to track to establish habits. Then what happens is as you start to move away from tracking, you've got new habits that are being built and you start to learn what portions look like. You learn which sort of foods get you to your numbers. But at some point you need to know if those foods get you to your numbers, right? So what I tell people is focus on tracking as a learning environment and then be mindful of the habits you're building in that so that down the road, when you move away from tracking, which is totally normal, by the way, we don't need to be tracking calories every day for the rest of our life. I don't. I track it in phases sometimes, depending on my goals. And so all that's to say, just think of tracking, especially in this regard, think of it as a learning environment where you get to take control of your health in this regard. Very, very important to do so if you have high blood pressure. So go in there excited to learn which foods get you to your numbers, learn which foods you like to include that get you to your numbers. Learn where you've got more freedom than perhaps you thought, right? This isn't a punishment. This is a freedom exercise to show you which foods you can include while making positive progress toward your goals. And then be mindful of the habits that you build within that tracking process so that it's not, well, as soon as you stop tracking, you go back to eating how you did before. So all that's to say, we like to talk about tracking as a positive thing. Think about it like budgeting. Like you've never heard anyone be like, "Oh, you guys budget your money? Wow, you're really obsessive. Wow, that's crazy." It's like, no, we want to win with money, right? And so and you establish habits, right? Like I have built-in habits since my wife and I track every dollar that we spend every month. We have certain habits. I sort of have mental guardrails, if you will, on my habits because I've done the discipline, I've done the classroom work of learning about how far my money goes in a given month, right? Same thing with calories, like learning how far your calories go in a given day, in a given week, in accordance with your goals and what helps you hit some of these goals is big. And of course, we always talk about health as an investment. So the financial analogy, of course, rings true is think of this as you depositing investments into the long-term, health. And so all that's to say, don't let tracking freak you out because a lot of times counting calories has this bad rap. those tracking environments serve you. You don't serve them. So think positively about those. Think offensively about those. It's not defensive. It's not punishment. It's a learning opportunity, ultimately to help you flourish, more moving forward. So just another random note. And by the way, maybe YouTube saw it, but my internet definitely dropped mid podcast. So I'm hoping our audio is synced. I know we're synced back up, but my internet definitely dropped for like 15 or 20 seconds or whatnot. So anyways, I hope that wasn't disrupting or any way, but YouTube, You might have saw me just freeze for a little bit or something like that.
So I think you brought up some really good points. One I just want to look back is when you're tracking and you have done it for a while, it's kind of nice because you have like a record of what worked for you. So something 100%. You can always go back to and be like,
yep.
Say a holiday happened, sickness happened, went on travel, whatever, you got out of tracking for a little bit. You can really just go back and look, what was working? What did I have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, recently that was going well. So, and Good then point. Like you said, just really focusing on the positive, not what we're decreasing, because I never like to talk about that. I always give people goals, what to increase, if we increase things, focus on that, it's much better. Okay. So like I said, following the macros and the micronutrients lined out in this plan really does answer the question, am I getting enough fruits and veggies? And then, like I said, all the health benefits to that. So the reason the micronutrients are included, the potassium, magnesium, and calcium, is they really actually help your body excrete extra sodium. So let's just say you go out to eat, you're obviously going to get a ton of sodium. So any restaurant, they want you to enjoy the food. Salt brings flavor, or enhances flavor, I should say. And so you're going to get the sodium overload. So the next thing you should do is have a ton of fruits and veggies, because that all the magnesium will help you, potassium, calcium will help you excrete the extra sodium.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Yeah.
And I just love that too. Like when you think about the power of micronutrients, a lot of times I think it seems sort of nebulous, right? Like they're these tiny little things that in small amounts can do really big things, but a lot of times we don't grasp what that is. Like we know like carbs, energy, yes, workout, cool, protein, muscle, build everything, fats, like nutrient absorption, and then we're like, well, how about potassium? People are like, well, or magnesium. Like, I keep hearing that it's important, but the fact that this thing goes in there and basically punches out excess sodium is just really cool. It's really a testament to how powerful micronutrients can be as well.
Yeah, exactly. So just to give you some practical sources of potassium, magnesium, and calcium. So fruits and veggies have potassium, magnesium, calcium, and fiber. So they're going to help us feel really satisfied on low calories. So really, I could list a few of these, but really any fruits and vegetables. So broccoli, carrots, collards, green beans, green peas, kale, spinach, tomatoes, apples, apricots, bananas, etc. Some starches and grains also give you potassium, magnesium, calcium, and fiber. So whole wheat bread, pasta, whole grain English muffin, oatmeal, brown rice, beans and lentils, etc. Sweet potatoes. Good source of calcium and protein. Okay. Can you guess what it is?
Calcium and protein? I'd go low-fat dairy.
There we go. Yes. Low-fat dairy. There's my superfood in there, low-fat kefir, low-fat yogurt, cottage cheese, ricotta cheese, etc. Okay. And then the last one, other protein foods, such as lean meats, poultry, nuts and seeds, are going to give a good source of magnesium, protein, calcium, and fiber. So, does that cover it? Do you feel like we covered what the DASH diet is, like the benefits? The disadvantages are a little slim, so yeah, you can kind of see.
And again, I think it goes back to context. Why was this developed and what is it used for? That tends to be where we run into issue with diets, right? So again, think of all the way back to keto. Keto was invented to help treat children with epilepsy. But now what it's up against, we're up against this wall of adults that are not epileptic children using it to lose weight. So where we bump up against some of these diets is they were designed for a specific reason, but how they're being utilized is usually out of accordance with that, right? And so, so that's the difference about this one, is that it was designed for a specific purpose, and it is generally deployed for a very specific purpose. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're out there and you've just got a circle of friends that are all doing they don't have high blood pressure, but they're like, oh, we learned about DASH diet, let's do it to lose weight. Like, it doesn't have that diet culture attachment to it, right? It's used for a specific reason. It's incredibly powerful. So, kind of how we end these, like, do we recommend a given diet? And we've sort of said, like, not really. Usually with most diets, there's some specific segments of the population, right? But for this one, if you have high blood pressure, we absolutely recommend it, And again, it's really in accordance with what we teach, irrespective of your goals. We teach the 4 pillars. Someone comes to me and says, Mark, I want to lose weight. What foods should I eat? The 4 pillars that we outlined: lean meat, seafood, and dairy, fruits and veggies, whole grains, nuts and seeds. I want to build muscle. What should I eat? The 4 pillars. I have high blood pressure. What should I focus on? The 4 pillars. I have high cholesterol. What should I focus on? The 4 pillars. I'm elderly. The 4 pillars. I've got kids. The 4 pillars, right? Like I'm an athlete. The 4 pillars. I'm an endurance athlete. The 4 pillars. I'm a strength athlete. The 4 pillars. It's the answer to 99% of the questions that are asked. What should I eat if ... The answer is 99% of the time, the 4 pillars. So yeah, we're big proponents, right? We're big proponents that if you have hypertension, use the DASH diet for sure. I mean, that's what it was built for, designed for. Deploy it to the benefit of you and ultimately your whole family. And so, yeah, the cons of it are really just the fact that it gets put into a diet ecosystem, or in name only, if you will, but it really is nutritional therapy, right? With a specific purpose. And so in that regard,
it looks like Mark froze again. So I think what he was, there you are.
Oh, yeah.
You're in and out again.
Is being wonky. Sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. And where we left off for you is kind of like the diet mentality. And that was one of the things, I think, when I told you those macronutrients, some of you may have said like 55% carbs. That seems high. So I think that could another be a turnoff for people, but actually it's not, because you're including all those non-starchy vegetables in that as well, when you're tracking macronutrients. So 55% carbs is not necessarily outrageous. It's really still allowing for balance of the other macronutrients. So,
and that's, I think that's on the lower end. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I know the AMDR, which is the Associated Macronutrient Distribution Range for protein, it's like 10 to 35%. If I believe I remember correctly, I didn't have these notes in front of me. I think carbs are like 55 to 70% or something like that. So I think it's even technically on the lower end of the AMDR. I could be wrong. But I know when I work with endurance athletes, we start, of a marathon running client, we start at 55% carb intake. Okay. And then that ramps all the way up to 70%. So anyway, all that's to say, yeah, don't let that spook you. Carbs are not a bad thing. I mean, we went into that in the keto episode, So again, a lot of that you're bumping up against what I would call as a dumb diet rule, a dumb diet culture rule that has us spooked about carbs. But I'll tell you, I mean, I'm a male, 5'11", 41 years old. I consistently consume over 200 grams of carbohydrates every day. And that's a no-brainer. So all that's to say, yes, don't be spooked at that. Don't let that be a con, because carbohydrates are incredible. Amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe Mark, we open the window that now we'll start hearing people following the DASH diet just to eat healthy and possibly lose some weight, prevent heart disease. Can we start the trend?
By the way, if there is, a lot of times, weight loss is associated, there's usually a clutch of health goals, right? So it's rare that someone, doesn't have 1 or 2 or 3 things that they could really benefit from, right? And so I think I might have mentioned this on a previous episode, but there was a study back in 2021 where they took the same group of people. I think we talked about it last week, and they said you can eat as much as you want. But we're going to just control the access that you have to certain foods. And so in the first phase of the study, they gave them access to ultra processed foods, okay? Low in protein, low in fiber. These aren't your whole natural foods. They're not the 4 pillars, basically. And so they did that for the first half of the phase. The second half of the phase, they gave them access to, they could still consume as much as they wanted, but they gave them access to essentially our 4 pillars: lean meat, seafood, and dairy, fruits and veggies, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, like mostly unprocessed or low processed whole foods, nutrient-dense foods. Guess what they found out? They did not control how much they ate, but guess what? They consumed 500 calories less just by virtue of the fact that their body was satisfied. They ended up starting to lose 1 pound per week. Naturally, they weren't counting calories. It was about their food choices. So what that study shows is that we tend to overconsume these processed foods, which come stacked with saturated fats, sodium, all sorts of stuff, and lack in protein and fiber. And then when you start fueling your body, right, with nutrient-dense foods like the 4 pillars, some of these health issues start to work themselves out. You start to have lower blood pressure. You start to lose weight. You're not even tracking calories. So all that's to say, you're absolutely right. Like if people just started, that's one of the most intuitive things you can do. And we just wrote an article. There's an article on our website. I didn't mean to promote this, but we recently just released an article called How to Lose Weight Without Counting Calories. And one of the big ones is prefer unprocessed foods. Minimize your processed foods and increase, to your point, increase your nutrient-dense natural foods. What happens is your body starts to naturally move in a healthier direction, but you do have to put in the effort. You have to put in the focus. You have to make those decisions. Your health will not naturally, gradually, accidentally get better. We know this, okay? But takes practice, takes time, takes habits. But when you do shift and say, I'm going to prefer more nutrient-dense whole foods in my diet, things like blood pressure start to come down. Things like extra body fat start to get reduced because you're consuming fewer calories, et cetera, et cetera. So all that's to say, it's a bit like throwing a rock into a pond. There's multiple ripples that are going to hit the shore when you start to focus on some of these core nutritional practices. And that really comes down to, again, the 4 pillars, much of which is exactly what's described in the DASH diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And please do check out that self-study, because it really doesn't have to say lowering high blood pressure. It could just be lowering processed foods or eating healthy. It is, specific medical nutrition therapy that, can lower your blood pressure. But like I said, it can do all of those other things that we mentioned today. So hopefully we'll hear more about DASH diet from
I think we've just 20 some odd years is just the start of this. And again, we're a proponent of this. We believe in this because it was designed for a specific reason. It has a very specific effect, and it weaves in just tried and true research backed best nutritional practices, if you will. So in that regard, it is different than a diet. And we're a big fan. So speaking of that, next week, we're going to do something a little different. Okay. Let's see if I can tease this properly. We're going to answer the question, is there a diet that we recommend? And we kind of answered that to a certain extent here. So if you have high blood pressure, yes, we recommend the DASH diet. Next week, anybody. Or anybody, really, because again, we're proponents of the 4 pillars, right? Yes, you should eat the 4 pillars. That's our thing, right? But next week, we're going to answer the question, is there any diet that we recommend? And I'll say with kind of the caveat, because, I talk about like a diet with a name, right? Because diet kind of has 2 meanings. One is just the foods you consume. That's your diet. But also diet has also culturally become to mean a certain way that you eat, and we ascribe a name to it or a set of protocols or tenets. And so if essentially this, and help me with this because we haven't recorded it yet, so we could still, come up with it now. But essentially, is there a diet
or
with
eating
a name
style
or eating style that for the masses, okay, so not just high blood pressure folks, that if we were asked to say, is there a diet that you would recommend for virtually all healthy people to continue to be healthy? And so next week, we're going to seek to answer that. And our answer might surprise you. Might not, but it might surprise you, because we tend to be sort of, I'm the guy like, you don't need another diet. You need a coach, that sort of stuff. Right? Diets are defensive. Nutrition is offensive. I'm a nutrition guy, not a diet guy. However, if you said, okay, but is there one? What would
Here's
that be?
one. Let's see if there's another.
exactly. Yeah. True. And when we mapped this out, we had our 5 weeks. I think we even had Whole30 this week instead of Dash, but we flipped that. And so that one did kind of throw us off because we recommend Dash, so above and beyond Dash and that special consideration.
There we go.
Is above and beyond Dash. Is there another? Is there another diet that we would recommend? So again, even if you're like, well, that's cool and I get it, it's just be healthier food. I get that. But, I'm looking for, something I could grab onto out there that's got a name that I could, that maybe Mark and Danielle wouldn't yell at me for adhering to or something like that. So I don't know if that set it up. Hopefully that teased folks. But we're going to talk about that next week. That's going to be a fun one. We're going to compare and contrast notes and see what we would recommend for you. And so, with that, definitely go check out the high blood pressure. I think we technically labeled that lowering high blood pressure self-study. And so again, how you find that is go to Imago Nutrition, IMAGO nutrition.com, and then go up into the navigation and tap on tap on services and then tap on high blood pressure. Scroll down that page and you'll see some big buttons. You won't be able to miss it. It'll say, self-study. And you can go download that. Again, very, we hope, very low priced self-study to, again, get you into the details of this. If you're not ready to meet, of course, if you'd like to meet with us, we're always there to do that as well. But if you want to take that next step in your health and begin lowering your blood pressure, take control of that area of your health, that self-study is your go-to. So with that, thank you so much, Danielle. I am sorry for my internet. We had some glitches going on today, but I guess that's just podcast life. I kind of knew at some point that would happen since we're doing this remote from 2 different states. So with that, anyways, if this episode has been helpful for you, be sure to subscribe so that you get notified, not only, future, but definitely next week when we come out with this amazing podcast episode that we're going to wrap up January with. Leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. We always love hearing from folks in the form of reviews as well, and share it with a friend. So if you've never heard of Dash Diet before and are intrigued, if your friends have been asking about it, or if you know anyone that perhaps is struggling with high blood pressure, we want to be there for you guys and be there to help them. So send them this episode. Hopefully that will help them. And if you're on social media, you can follow us across all the major platforms at Imago Nutrition, at IMAGO Nutrition, and would love to see you over there. Drop us a comment on any social platform. It will generally be myself or Danielle leaving you a reply. And as always, we like to thank our band, not our band, it's not our band, but the band, Happy Pill, for our theme song, Thinkin Bout Food. We'll see you next week.